Whispers of doubt. Whispering wind sought refuge amidst the sighing boughs of the ancient oaks encircling the village. The woodland floor, a patchwork of verdant moss and shed acorns, offered her solace. She deciphered the sibilant language of wind through leaves, the hurried scolding of squirrels, the mute sagacity of stones. Unlike the village's rowdy children, she favored nature's company, finding no judgment for her quietude or her abandoned past. Her days were spent gathering herbs, their fragrances etched into her memory. The brisk bite of mint, the deep earthiness of ginseng, the soothing balm of chamomile. She discerned which flora soothed a cough, which unguents mended a wound. Elder Willow, recognizing her innate talent, had patiently imparted ancient wisdom, secrets passed down through generations of healers. Lately, however, even the woods seemed to hold its breath. A disquiet pervaded the village, a creeping darkness. The crops, normally abundant, languished under the summer heat. Verdant corn stalks faded to a jaundiced yellow, their kernels stunted and frail. A peculiar cough ripped through the settlement, leaving villagers drained and fevered. Even the deer, usually plentiful in the surrounding thickets, had vanished. Fear, like a tendril, started to constrict the tribe's spirit. Venomous rumors snaked through the village. "The harvest has failed," Chaitin, a hunter famed for his volatile temper and even sharper tongue, declared near the cooking fire one evening. "The spirits are angered. We must find the source of their discontent." His gaze lingered on Whispering Wind. She sat slightly apart, repairing a rent in her well-worn buckskin dress. Firelight danced across her features, illuminating the fine line of her cheekbone, the cautious spark in her obsidian eyes. "She arrived as an infant, abandoned to our care," Chaitin continued, his voice growing louder. "We know nothing of her lineage, her forebears. Perhaps she carries a hex, a vestige of a forgotten bloodline." Whispering Wind's breath caught. She averted her eyes, her fingers trembling as she fought to maintain composure. The familiar ache of isolation, of being an outsider, flared within her. Little Bird, a frequent companion during storytelling nights, frowned. "Chaitin, that's unjust," she countered, her voice small yet resolute. "Whispering Wind helps everyone. She heals the ailing. She understands a way of the plants." Chaitin scoffed derisively. "Healing with herbs? Perhaps she employs other methods. Perhaps she dabbles in forbidden knowledge. Who knows what she mutters to the wind?" He waved his hand dismissively. "She speaks to the forest as though it responds. It's unnatural." A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. Fear, once subdued, began to vocalize. Whispering Wind felt a frigid premonition settle deep in her bones. She had always perceived herself as different, an observer looking inward. Now that distinction was being manipulated, weaponized against her. Elder Willow, who had been observing the proceedings with a discerning gaze, stepped forward. Her voice, though gentle, resonated with unquestionable authority. "Chaitin, your words are rash and unkind. Whispering Wind is under my protection and a valued member of this community. She has demonstrated only compassion and service to our people." "But Elder Willow," Chaitin pressed, his voice dripping with false concern, "can we disregard the misfortunes that have plagued us since her arrival? The blighted crops, the epidemic, surely it's not mere coincidence." He scanned the crowd, soliciting support. Several faces mirrored his anxiety, his suspicion. The seed of doubt had been sown, and it was already sprouting. Whispering Wind felt a knot forming in her throat. She yearned to defend herself, to assert that she would never intentionally inflict harm. But the words lodged in her throat, strangled by dread and vulnerability. She was an orphan, a stranger amongst them. Who would believe her plea? Elder Willow sighed, her eyes conveying profound sorrow. "Let us not succumb to panic, my people," she implored, her gaze sweeping across the assembled group. "Let us not turn against each other in times of adversity. We are stronger united, bound by empathy and understanding." Yet, Whispering Wind perceived the hesitation lingering in their eyes, the unspoken queries hanging in the atmosphere. She knew that Chayton's accusations had struck their mark. The rumors would persist, escalating, becoming more insistent, until they eclipsed the voice of reason. The forest, once her haven, now seemed to echo with the whispers of her impending downfall. Banished. The fire crackled, spitting embers like angry pronouncements. The tribal council ringed it, their faces etched with worry, illuminated by the flickering light. The air, thick with the scent of pine and fear, tasted acrid on Whispering Wind's tongue. She stood in the center, her shoulders slumped, the weight of their collective gaze heavy on her. Chayton, his face a mask of grim determination, stepped forward. The rains have failed. The deer have vanished. Sickness lingers in our lodges. Since Whispering Wind returned from the Shadowlands, misfortune clings to us like burrs to a wolf's coat. His voice was low, resonant, designed to stir the deepest anxieties. He held aloft a withered stalk of corn, its kernels shriveled and gray. This is what she brings: death and emptiness. A murmur rippled through the council. Whispering Wind flinched. The Shadowlands, a place of spirits, a place she had been forced to journey to. It was supposed to bring her closer to the Great Spirit, but now it was used against her. Elder Willow rose, her wrinkled face etched with a plea. She leaned heavily on her staff, her voice raspy but firm. Chayton, you speak of misfortune, but is that truly Whispering Wind's doing? The Great Spirit tests us all. We must not succumb to fear and seek a scapegoat. She turned to Whispering Wind, her eyes filled with warmth. This girl, she has a heart as gentle as the summer breeze. She has healed the sick, shared her meager food, and comforted the grieving. How can such kindness bring about evil? Kindness cannot ward off spirits. Elder, Chayton countered, his voice hardening. The Shadowlands taint those who walk within them. We cannot risk the entire tribe for the sake of one soul, however kind. He gestured to the withered corn. The evidence is before you. We must choose between her and our survival. The council members shifted uneasily, their eyes darting between Elder Willow and Chayton. Fear, Whispering Wind realized, was a far stronger weapon than kindness. One by one, they spoke, their voices hushed and regretful. Each acknowledged Whispering Wind's good nature, but each also echoed Chayton's fear. The vote was taken in silence, each not a hammer blow to Whispering Wind's heart. When it was finished, the result was clear. Banished, Chayton announced, his voice devoid of emotion. A sob escaped Whispering Wind's lips. No, she whispered, her voice cracking. Please, I would never. Elder Willow rushed to her side, her hand trembling as she squeezed Whispering Wind's arm. Do not despair, child. This is not justice, but fear speaking. Remember who you are. Remember your strength. Two warriors stepped forward, their faces averted. They gently took Whispering Wind by the arms, guiding her away from the fire, away from the only home she had ever known. The scent of wood smoke, once comforting, now choked her. The faces of her people, once familiar and welcoming, were now blurred with pity and fear. She stumbled as they led her through the sleeping village, the silence broken only by her choked sobs and the rustling of leaves underfoot. The moon hung high in the sky, a cold, indifferent witness to her expulsion. They reached the edge of the forest, the boundary between their land and the unknown. The warriors stopped, releasing her arms. You cannot return, one of them said, his voice barely audible. May the Great Spirit guide you. Whispering Wind stood there, alone in the darkness, the forest looming before her like a hungry beast. She turned back to look at her village, a cluster of glowing embers in the distance. Her heart ached with a pain so profound it stole her breath. Banished, cast out, accused of a crime she didn't commit. What had she done to deserve this? Tears streamed down her face as she turned and stepped into the darkness, the rustling leaves swallowing her whole. Eyes in the dark. The last sliver of sun bled into the horizon, painting the sky in hues of bruised purple and angry orange. Whispering Wind huddled deeper into the meager blanket, the coarse wool scratching against her skin, a constant reminder of her exile. Each rustle of leaves sounded like approaching footsteps, each snap of a twig like the breaking of her own heart. Fear, a cold serpent, coiled tighter around her chest. She had walked for hours, driven only by the need to escape the accusing stares, the whispered curses that clung to her like the stench of smoke after a fire. The elders had spoken of misfortune following her, of blighted crops and barren animals. Her own family, faces etched with grief and resentment, had cast her out. Now, alone in the deepening twilight, she understood their fear, for the darkness itself seemed to hold a malevolent sentience. The wind whispered through the trees, no longer a comforting song, but a mournful lament, echoing her solitude. She closed her eyes, but the images remained. Her mother's tear-streaked face, her brother's averted gaze, the cold, hard ground where she had knelt, begging for forgiveness she didn't understand needing. A low growl broke through her despair. Her eyes snapped open. 2 points of green fire burned in the gloom. Then another pair, and another, until the darkness was riddled with them. A constellation of predatory eyes. Wolves. They emerged slowly, silently, from the trees, their silhouettes solidifying against the fading light. Large, gaunt, and menacing, they encircled her, a ring of death tightening with each heartbeat. Whispering Wind pressed herself against the rough bark of a tree, her breath catching in her throat. She had heard stories of wolves, their hunger, their ferocity. She knew she was no match for them. One of the wolves, larger than the others, stepped forward. Its lips peeled back from its teeth in a silent snarl, a pink tongue flicking out to taste the air. The scent of fear, thick and cloying, must have filled its nostrils. Terror lent her a strange clarity. She knew she could run, but where? They would easily outpace her. She could scream, but there was no one to hear. This was it then. The end of Whispering Wind, not with a bang, but with a whimper swallowed by the unforgiving forest. A sudden flash of movement, a sharp twang, and a choked yelp shattered the stillness. An arrow, fletched with hawk feathers, had found its mark, burying itself deep in the shoulder of the lead wolf. The creature staggered back, howling in pain and surprise. More arrows followed, whistling through the air, finding their targets with deadly accuracy. The wolves, momentarily disoriented, scattered, their glowing eyes disappearing back into the shadows. A figure emerged from the trees, bow drawn, eyes narrowed, a warrior carved from granite and moonlight. Swift Arrow. He moved with a grace that belied his strength, his moccasins silent on the forest floor. He knocked another arrow, scanning the darkness, ensuring the wolves were truly gone. Only when he was satisfied did he lower his bow, his gaze turning to Whispering Wind. She remained frozen against the tree, her body trembling, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and disbelief. He was real, not a hallucination born of desperation. He had saved her. "Are you hurt?" His voice was deep and resonant, like the rumble of distant thunder, yet surprisingly gentle. She shook her head, unable to speak, tears blurring her vision. He approached cautiously, his eyes filled with concern. "What are you doing out here alone?" The question broke the dam. The story poured out of her, a torrent of despair and injustice, of accusations and banishment. She spoke of the blighted crops, the barren animals, the fear that had gripped her village, and the elder's decision. Swift Arrow listened in silence, his expression unreadable. When she was finished, he remained silent for a long moment, studying her face in the dim light. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and steady. "The forest is a dangerous place, especially at night. You cannot stay here alone." He paused, then a flicker of something she couldn't decipher crossed his face. "Kulme, you will come with me." Relief washed over her, so profound it almost buckled her knees. A safe place, a warm fire, a moment of respite from the relentless darkness. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse with emotion. "Thank you, Swift Arrow." He nodded curtly, then turned and walked back into the trees, expecting her to follow. Whispering Wind hesitated for only a moment before gathering her blanket and stepping out of the shadows, following the path Swift Arrow had cleared, leaving behind the terror and embracing, for now, the glimmer of hope he offered. A warrior's heart. Swift Arrow knelt, his capable hands examining Whispering Wind's injured arm. She winced, a delicate chirp escaping her throat. Though the fire chuckled and threw lively shadows against the trees, her attention remained solely on him. In her dark, dilated pupils, he saw terror reflected, a chilling echo of his own concern. "Easy, little sister," he soothed, using their familial bond as a balm. "Just a nasty bruise. The wolves didn't break anything." He carefully tore a strip of supple buckskin from his tunic, dampened it with water from his canteen, and gently cleansed the injured area. She remained tense, but the tremor racking her body subsided a fraction. Why did you bother?" Her voice, a breathy sigh, disappeared into the whispering leaves. Swift Arrow's gaze, the warm hue of fertile soil, locked with hers. "Because you are Whispering Wind," he stated simply. "I've seen you at the village's edge, nursing wounded birds back to health. You possess a radiant compassion that defies even the deepest darkness. Such light isn't meant to be snuffed out by wolves." He finished the makeshift bandage, his touch feather-light. Rising, he extended a hand. "Kulme, we can't linger. The woods have ears, and those who banished you might still be listening." Whispering Wind hesitated, her eyes flicking nervously toward the oppressive forest from which she'd fled. Trust was a hard-won thing, shattered by the betrayal that led to her exile. Yet in Swift Arrow's eyes, she found no deception, only quiet strength and a profound melancholy mirroring her own despair. She accepted his hand, her slender fingers swallowed by his rough grip. Their progress was slow and arduous. Swift Arrow guided her through dense thickets and across gurgling creeks, his senses heightened. The forest, usually a sanctuary for him, felt different tonight, pregnant with danger. He identified the spoor of deer and bear, instructing her in the wood's language, hoping to divert her from her fear. Though weakened and frightened, Whispering Wind displayed surprising fortitude. She stumbled often, but each time, she regained her footing, her resolve fueled by the raw instinct to survive. She voiced few questions, but her eyes absorbed everything: the shapes of the trees, the melodies of birds, the texture of the earth. As they ascended into the mountains, the air sharpened with cold, and the trees scattered, offering glimpses of a diamond-dusted sky. Finally, after what felt like an age, Swift Arrow halted before a secluded cabin, cleverly hidden among a stand of ancient pines. "This is my home," he announced, his voice a soft rumble. Humble but safe. He swung open the heavy wooden door and ushered her inside. The cabin, small and plainly appointed, was nonetheless clean and dry, a welcome refuge from the biting night. Embers glowed in the hearth, promising warmth and comfort. Whispering Wind lingered just inside the threshold, her eyes wide with trepidation. This was a world apart from the village, from the comfortable rhythm of her past life. This was the wilderness, the realm of predators and lone men. Swift Arrow recognized her fear and knelt by the hearth, coaxing the embers into a lively blaze. He beckoned her to sit beside him. "Rest, Whispering Wind. You're safe here. No one will lay a hand on you." He set about preparing a meager meal of dried berries and smoked fish. The savory aroma permeated the small cabin, a welcome balm that gradually eased the tension from Whispering Wind's hunched shoulders. As she ate, she watched him, scrutinizing his movements, his expression, searching for any hint of falsehood. Slowly, tentatively, trust began to unfurl within her heart, a delicate bloom pushing through the frozen soil of her despair. He had twice rescued her from death. He had offered her sanctuary and sustenance, not out of pity, but out of a deep-rooted conviction in her intrinsic goodness. Perhaps, just perhaps, she had stumbled upon a sanctuary, a place where she could finally mend and begin to rebuild her shattered world. The warrior's compassion offered a glimmer of hope. Lessons of the Wild. Silence was their initial tutor. Swift Arrow ghosted through the sun-dappled woods, his footfalls barely disturbing the leaf litter. Whispering Wind, her injured leg still a burden, lagged behind, each footfall a noisy intrusion. "Hush," he breathed, stopping by a thicket bursting with scarlet berries. Listen to the forest language. The wind whispers through the canopy, jays squabble, voices that reveal hidden dangers, point to unseen treasures. He taught her to discern the edible from the deadly, steering her clear of poisonous doppelgangers. Deer, bear, rabbit. He spoke of them not as quarry, but as kin, each woven into the tapestry of existence. That night, nestled in a lean-to he'd fashioned from boughs and woven foliage, the sharp, clean tang of pine soothed Whispering Wind's troubled mind. Watching the firelight dance across his face, she felt a tentative seed of trust sprout within her. He was unlike the men of her village, where brutality was prized above all and quiet was seen as a defect. The following dawn, he initiated her into the art of tracking, revealing how to decipher the faint narratives etched upon the land. A snapped branch, a scuffed patch of earth, a feather fallen from the sky. He stressed patience, keen observation, and, above all, reverence. "We take only what is needed," he stated, his tone earnest. "Never exploit. The forest is generous, but we must honor its gifts." Then, he presented a small, meticulously carved bow and a quiver of arrows adorned with hawk plumes. Whispering Wind had never held such a weapon. Her fingers, awkward and unaccustomed, fumbled with the bowstring. With calm direction, Swift Arrow showed her how to knock the arrow, draw back, focus her intent. Her first attempts were clumsy failures, the arrows veering wildly off course. But Swift Arrow offered encouragement, pinpointing the minute adjustments required. Gradually, she found a rhythm. The tension in her shoulders dissipated, her breath steadied, and her aim sharpened. The satisfying thunk as her arrow struck the target, a weathered tree trunk, resonated within her, a wellspring of pride long dormant. It was more than just hunting, it was unearthing a hidden strength. One evening, seated by the crackling fire, Swift Arrow began to share tales of his people, the Cherokee. He spoke with respect of their deep connection to the land, their intricate social order, their unwavering faith in the unseen. He painted vivid pictures of dances, songs, and rituals that bound them together. In turn, Whispering Wind offered glimpses of her own past, carefully omitting the events that had driven her into exile. She spoke of her childhood, her aspirations to heal, the love she held for her grandmother. As she spoke, the sting of betrayal seemed to diminish, replaced by the fragile hope that perhaps she could forge a new beginning in this wilderness. "What dreams do you hold now?" Swift Arrow inquired gently, his gaze searching hers. Whispering Wind hesitated. "To deserve your kindness," she murmured softly, "and perhaps to find a place to truly belong." He reached for her hand, his touch surprisingly tender. "You are already here," he said, his voice resolute. "You are here with me." That night, beneath a canopy of brilliant stars, Whispering Wind experienced a serenity she had not felt since childhood. The wild was unforgiving, demanding, but also magnificent and teeming with life. And in Swift Arrow's company, she was beginning to decipher its secrets and discover her own resilience. The forest, once the embodiment of her fear, was slowly transforming into a haven. The village's regret. The dust swirled thicker now, coating everything in a gritty film. Another field of corn withered, stalks brittle and brown, offering no sustenance. The air, once sweet with the promise of autumn harvest, now smelled only of decay. The coughing, too, had worsened, a rattling chorus that echoed from every hut, painting the village with a grim melody of sickness. A low moan rippled through the crowd gathered near the empty fields. Chayton, his face gaunt but his voice still sharp, pointed a finger towards the distant, shadowed mountains. "This is her doing. Whispering Wind has cursed us for our righteous judgment." Little Bird, her small frame trembling, stepped forward. "No, Whispering Wind would never do this. She always helped. She shared her knowledge of the plants, even when some scorned her. Her voice, though small, cut through Chayton's venom. "Silence, child," Chayton spat. "You were always her friend. Of course you defend her. But look around you. The proof is in the dust and the sickness." Fear, a cold, creeping vine, tightened its grip on the villagers' hearts. They saw only the failing crops, the feverish eyes of their children, the slow, agonizing decline of their elders. Doubt, however, had begun to gnaw at the edges of their certainty. Was it truly Whispering Wind's doing, or something else entirely? Elder Willow, her face etched with deeper lines than usual, pushed her way to the front of the crowd, leaning heavily on her gnarled staff. The setting sun cast long, skeletal shadows around her. Her voice, usually a soothing balm, was strained, laced with a desperate urgency. "Enough. We acted in haste, driven by fear, not wisdom." She closed her eyes, her wrinkled brow furrowing as she searched the depths of her memory. Then, her eyes snapped open, alight with a flicker of something long forgotten. The prophecy. I remember now. It spoke of a time of great hardship, when the land would weep and the people would suffer. It said that only a girl with a pure heart, unjustly banished, could restore balance. A collective gasp swept through the crowd. The air, thick with dust and despair, felt suddenly charged. Whispering Wind, unjustly banished. The words hung heavy in the silence. But she was accused of witchcraft. A villager stammered, his voice laced with confusion. "Accused," Elder Willow corrected, her voice firm. "Not proven. We judged her based on suspicion and fear, not on truth." She looked at each of them, her eyes filled with a profound sadness. "We have made a terrible mistake." She raised her staff, her frail hand surprisingly strong. "We must find Whispering Wind. We must beg her forgiveness and ask for her help." Chayton scoffed. "She will never forgive us. She will rejoice in our suffering." Elder Willow turned to him, her gaze unwavering. "We do not know her heart, Chayton, but we know our own, and we know that we have wronged her. We must try. The lives of our people depend on it." A hesitant murmur rippled through the crowd, then grew into a chorus of agreement. The villagers, their faces etched with a mixture of hope and shame, began to stir. The weight of their regret pressed down on them, heavier than any drought or illness. "Little bird," Elder Willow said, her voice softer now, "you know her best. Can you lead us to her?" Little bird, tears streaming down her face, nodded fiercely. "Yes, Elder, I will take you to her." The villagers, driven by a newfound sense of purpose, began to prepare for the journey. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of fiery orange and bruised purple. As darkness fell, a single prayer rose from the heart of the village, carried on the wind. "Forgive us, Whispering Wind. Forgive us." A bridge between worlds. The sodden earth sucked at their moccasins as the search party ventured deeper into the gloom-choked woods. Elder Willow, her back bowed beneath the weight of years and regret, leaned on a staff carved with the likeness of a grieving spirit. The air, a cloying mix of pine and leaf mold, pressed down on them, heavy with unspoken remorse. Every snap of a twig underfoot, every rustle in the canopy above, echoed the guilt that festered within. Fear had driven them to exile Whispering Wind, branding her a witch. Now, the crops withered, streams dwindled to dust, and the forest's vibrant tapestry faded to somber hues. "The river coils back on itself twice," Willow wheezed, her voice as fragile as dried reeds. "Then seek the east, where dawn first gilds the crown of the tallest oak. He awaits." Doubt flickered in their eyes, yet the conviction that they had grievously wronged Whispering Wind, that only she held the key to healing their blighted world, propelled them onward. The hours dissolved into a silent, punishing march. At last, as the dwindling sunlight slanted through the trees, they spotted it, a tendril of smoke, curling lazily into the amethyst sky. Swift arrows dwelling, A sanctuary hewn from the heart of the wild stood before them. A rustic cabin of logs and clay, it seemed to grow organically from the earth. As the group warily approached, the door creaked inward. Swift Arrow stood silhouetted, one hand resting on the pommel of his knife, a sentinel guarding his domain. His sharp, assessing gaze swept across their faces. "What brings the village to my threshold?" he queried, his tone even and controlled. From the shadows behind him, Whispering Wind emerged. A transformation was evident. The haunted sadness that once clouded her eyes had been replaced by a spark of fierce independence. Her skin, kissed by the sun, radiated a healthy glow. Clad in practical, sturdy deerskin, she was no longer the vulnerable outcast they remembered. A collective intake of breath swept through the search party. Whispering Wind, alive and flourishing. Elder Willow shuffled forward, her face a map of wrinkles etched with contrition. "Whispering Wind," she rasped, her voice trembling like a leaf in a gale. "We erred. Forgive us. The land suffers. We plead for your return." Whispering Wind scrutinized their faces, seeking any hint of deception. She saw the worry lines etched deep around their eyes, the authentic sorrow in their stooped postures. She discerned fear, not of her, but of the withering world around them. Her gaze lingered on Elder Willow, who had always offered a sliver of kindness, even amidst the village's escalating paranoia. "The forest has embraced me," Whispering Wind declared, her voice a resonant chord. "Swift Arrow has taught me to live in concert with this land, not to cower from it." She glanced at Swift Arrow, their eyes meeting in a silent communion. The air thrummed with unspoken questions. Would she relent? Could she forgive them their trespass? "I will return," Whispering Wind announced, her voice ringing with newfound authority. A communal sigh of relief washed over the group. But she had more to say. "But I do not come alone." She moved, placing a hand on Swift Arrow's forearm. Swift Arrow sheltered me, shared his knowledge, and offered a respect I never knew existed. If I am to return, he returns with me. He will be welcomed as one of your own. A low grumble of dissent rippled through the gathering. Acceptance? Of an outsider? Of a man who had harbored a suspected witch? Elder Willow raised a hand, silencing the murmur. "She speaks with the clarity of wisdom," she countered, her gaze unwavering. "We exiled her out of blind fear. Let's not repeat that folly." The prophecies spoke of balance, of embracing the unknown. If Whispering Wind deems Swift Arrow essential to restoring equilibrium, then we must place our faith in her judgment. Whispering Wind watched them, her expression an enigma. Their acceptance of her was one thing, but to accept Swift Arrow, a man from a different people, a man who had flouted their laws to protect her, was a far greater test of their repentance. The fate of their village, perhaps even their world, teetered on the precipice. Restoring balance. The air hung thick and heavy with the scent of wood smoke and despair. Little Bird, trembling like a willow in a storm, led a procession of villagers through the overgrown path towards Swift Arrow's secluded dwelling. Whispering Wind, alerted by the distant sounds of approaching footsteps, met them at the edge of the clearing, Swift Arrow a silent sentinel at her side. Elder Willow, his face etched with worry, stepped forward, his hand outstretched. Whispering Wind, he croaked, his voice raspy with regret. "We are in dire need." Whispering Wind studied his face, the lines of age now deeper, underscored by the weight of responsibility. "Tell me what troubles you, Elder." The crops had failed, Willow explained, the corn stalks withered and brown, the beans stunted and pale. A strange sickness had also swept through the village, leaving many weak and feverish. Whispering Wind listened patiently, her gaze sweeping over the anxious faces before her. "Take me to the fields," she finally said, her voice calm and resolute. The fields were a desolate sight. Whispering Wind knelt, examining the parched earth and the blighted plants. She plucked a handful of soil, crumbling it between her fingers. "The soil lacks vital nutrients," she announced, her voice clear and authoritative. The repeated planting of corn has depleted the earth. You need to rotate your crops, introduce nitrogen-fixing plants like beans and clover to replenish the soil. She pointed to a nearby stream, and divert water from the stream to irrigate the fields during the driest months. A murmur of understanding rippled through the crowd. Chayton, his arms crossed, stood at the back, his expression unreadable. Next, she turned her attention to the sick. She examined each villager with care, her touch gentle and reassuring. She recognized the symptoms: a deficiency in essential vitamins, likely exacerbated by the poor harvest. She instructed them to gather specific plants: wild berries rich in vitamin C, dandelion greens for iron, and the bark of the willow tree for its fever-reducing properties. Boil the bark and drink the tea, she instructed, her voice steady. Eat the berries and greens. They will help your bodies heal. As the villagers dispersed to follow her instructions, Swift Arrow watched with pride. He saw a strength in her, a quiet confidence that had not been there before. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the village, a group of young men approached Swift Arrow. They had witnessed his bravery in hunting, his skill with a bow, and his unwavering loyalty to Whispering Wind. Swift Arrow, one of them, a young man named Hawk, began, his voice respectful. "We have judged you unfairly. You are a warrior, a protector. We see that now. Another step forward. We ask that you join us in defending our village. We need your strength." Swift Arrow nodded, accepting their acknowledgement. "I will fight alongside you," he replied, his voice firm. Even Chayton, observing from the edge of the crowd, offered a grudging nod of respect. Whispering Wind, watching from afar, felt a warmth spread through her. The scales were beginning to tip, the balance slowly being restored. The village was not yet ready to fully embrace her, but they were beginning to see the value in her knowledge and the strength in Swift Arrow's heart. There was still much work to be done, but a seed of hope had been planted, and she knew, with a certainty that settled deep within her bones, that it would grow. A legend of love. The first rains after the blight arrived with hesitant grace, a timid caress upon the parched land. Then they deepened, settling in, drawing life back from the precipice of oblivion. Where skeletal corn stalks had rattled in the wind, verdant rose now swayed, pregnant with harvest. The river, once a mere ribbon of mud, swelled, its current alive with the glint of returning fish. The villagers' faces, hollowed by hunger, regained their roundness, their steps quickened, and laughter, long absent, echoed anew through the valley. Whispering Wind strolled through the burgeoning fields, inhaling the earthy fragrance of revival. She brushed her fingers against the swollen kernels, a quiet contentment blossoming in her heart. It wasn't solely the rain, she understood, but the resurgence of hope, the collective effort, the shared faith that even the bleakest winter yields to spring's embrace. Beside her, Swift Arrow moved with newfound assurance. The villagers, initially mistrustful of his quiet intensity, now sought his wisdom. They no longer perceived a brute, but a guardian, a man whose actions resonated far beyond spoken words. He had cleared choked irrigation channels, his powerful physique shifting boulders with surprising dexterity. He had hunted relentlessly, replenishing dwindling stores with deer and rabbit. Nightly, he stood sentinel, his sharp gaze sweeping the horizon, a silent promise of safety and vigilance. Their love deepened amidst the shared labor, a tacit understanding flowing between them as they worked the fields beneath the vast, celestial tapestry. No grand pronouncements were exchanged, no elaborate declarations voiced, just the quiet reassurance of shared purpose, shoulder to shoulder. Whispering Wind found herself increasingly drawn to his understated strength, the tenderness he displayed towards animals, the fierce protectiveness that flared in his eyes when he looked upon her. Swift Arrow, in turn, discovered solace in her wisdom, her unwavering optimism, the way she perceived the inherent goodness in everyone, even when obscured by hardship. One evening, Elder Willow summoned them to the village heart. A bonfire blazed merrily, casting flickering silhouettes upon expectant faces. The air thrummed with anticipation. "We are blessed beyond measure," Elder Willow began, his voice aged yet resonant. "The Great Spirit has favored us once more, but we must also recognize those who helped guide us back from darkness." He indicated Whispering Wind and Swift Arrow. Whispering Wind, with her profound knowledge and unwavering courage, found the path to heal the land. Swift Arrow, with his formidable strength and unwavering loyalty, became our shield against despair. They have demonstrated the power of unity, the enduring importance of hope. Their tale will be recounted around our fires for generations to come. A ripple of affirmation spread through the assembled crowd. A young woman then stepped forward, bearing a wreath of wildflowers, which she placed upon Whispering Wind's head. Another presented Swift Arrow with a meticulously carved flute, its surface smoothed by years of handling. Others followed, each offering a token of gratitude: a hand-woven blanket, a bundle of dried herbs, a carefully polished stone. As the evening unfolded, the villagers raised their voices in song. Ancient melodies, passed down through uncounted generations, resonated with renewed vigor, infused with newfound joy. Hand in hand, Whispering Wind and Swift Arrow listened to the music, basking in the warmth of their community. Their story was transforming into a legend, a testament to the potency of love and resilience. Later, as the fire ebbed, Whispering Wind noticed Little Bird standing on the periphery, her face a canvas of shyness and remorse. Whispering Wind approached her, her heart brimming with understanding. "Little Bird," she murmured. Little Bird looked up, her eyes wide and vulnerable. "Whispering Wind, I was mistaken. We all stumble." Whispering Wind responded gently, taking her hand. "What truly matters is learning from our missteps." Little Bird squeezed her hand. "I am grateful for your return. I am grateful for your help. We aided one another," Whispering Wind said, smiling warmly. "That is what truly matters." They stood in comfortable silence, observing the fading embers. The air was crisp, carrying the mingled scents of wood smoke and moist earth. The village radiated peace, its future now secure. Whispering Wind knew that future trials were inevitable, but they would confront them together, strengthened and enriched by the ordeals they had overcome. The legend of their love, conceived in hardship and tempered by hope, would continue to inspire them, a beacon illuminating the darkness, a constant reminder that even the most violent storms eventually yield to the gentle light of dawn.